The Sony 10 to 20mm power zoom is a unique ultra-wide lens for APS-C cameras. This lens is optimized for videos, but you can definitely still shoot photos with this as well. The lens is a 15 to 30 full frame equivalent, which means it's great for walking around and capturing wide landscapes, vlogging, or even zooming in and get some closer shots. Let's go over the details of this lens and I'll give you my thoughts at the end. The 10 to 20 costs $750 and it has an aperture range from f4 to f22. It is a 2.2 by 2.7 inch lens and it weighs 6.3 ounces. The build quality is very good for the amount of features packed into this lens. This lens has an AF/MF switch, focus hold button, a zoom ring, and a toggle rocker and a zoom ring for the internal power zoom. All of those switches and rings in a very small package. This lens has 7 aperture blades, a 62 front millimeter mount, and is dust and moisture resistant. One thing to note about the zoom on this lens though, if you are zooming at say 18 millimeters and you turn the camera off and turn it back on again, the lens will reset to 10 millimeters. That was kind of annoying. If you have a 24 to 105 and you're zoomed in at 50, that's a physically zooming lens. So maybe the power zoom is always cycling the power, it's going to be at 10. That was one thing I did run into with this lens. One mistake I was making with this lens constantly was I was mixing up the zoom ring and the focus ring since they're pretty much the same size. One trick I did was the focus ring is towards the front of the camera and the zoom ring is closer to the zoom rocker. After I kind of made this little trick in my mind, I never mixed up these two rings again, but for like the first hour I was using this, I was constantly mixing up these rings and it seemed like I was getting it wrong every try. You can also zoom this lens with certain gimbals, the Sony shooting grip, or the app. I didn't get a chance to use any of those features to try them out, but those ways seem like maybe a little more difficult way of controlling the zoom on this lens. Maybe the gimbal's a little more intuitive if you're used to doing that, but I think the ring was the easiest way for me, followed by the actual rocker because there's multiple speeds. If you barely bump it, it will zoom in very slowly at a consistent speed. If you do it a little more, it'll zoom in medium and then all the way will zoom in pretty quickly. The autofocus for the 10 to 20 millimeters is great for both photos and videos. I was walking around with this lens and had no issues with it hunting for focus or missing focus. This is great since it's mainly focused at video shooters. Having quick, reliable, silent autofocus is a must, especially at this price point. Sharpness and image quality with the 10 to 20 millimeter is good in the middle with softer edges at the frame at 10 millimeters. At 5.6, the edges are sharper and have more contrast. At f11, the lens starts to get a little softer on the corners again. At 20 millimeters, this lens is sharp in the center and corners at f4. Overall, great image quality out of this lens, and I've been happy with its performance, minus the corner sharpness at those lower apertures at 10 millimeters. For flaring, the 10 to 20 millimeter has minimal flaring even for an ultra-wide like this. For an ultra-wide lens like this, there's a lot of possible areas for light to enter the front of the lens, and the flare control is actually pretty good with the 10 to 20. Chromatic aberration is well controlled in my testing with the 10 to 20 as well. The lens's minimum aperture of f4 may have something to do with that, but when pixel peeping, I wasn't able to see much color fringing. The bokeh on the 10 to 20 is difficult to achieve without having your subject really close to the lens since the widest aperture is at f4. You'll want to be shooting at 20 millimeters to get the best bokeh. That being said, the bokeh is not going to be as extreme as a prime lens. The build quality, size, and weight of these recent APS-C lenses has been great to pair with these smaller APS-C bodies, and it's not really a chore to lug around if you're out and about filming or traveling all day. There is one thing I didn't use on this lens though, and it's one of the biggest features. I honestly didn't find myself using the power zoom feature a whole lot when I was out shooting. I used it a couple times, but I feel like from 10 to 20 millimeters, if I'm doing that, I can just do a slow zoom in post. It's not the same, I understand, but for wide angle lenses, I find myself using the zoom a little less. If this was a 24 to 105, I could see using the power zoom a lot with that, and it would be a little more versatile. It would probably be much larger and more expensive, but I could see myself using that focal range with the power zoom a little bit more. Let me know what you think of this lens in the comments down below. And if you're looking for more Sony APS-C lens reviews, check out this one of the 11mm 1.8 or this one of the 15mm 1.4G lens. Thank you guys for sticking around to the end, and I'll see you in the next one.